I'm curious to listen to the next speaker, Kirsty Gogan, because you already announced Susie, and Kirsty is the co-founder and executive director of Energy for Humanity, a UK and Switzerland-based NGO with a global outlook focused on large-scale deep decarbonization and energy access. EFIH led a delegation of the world's most highly regarded climate scientists to Paris in order to make the case for nuclear to be recognized as a vital part of the nuclear energy mix, and I think was successful. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning everybody. So it's my real honor to share with you some details around the Flexible Nuclear Campaign for nuclear and renewables integration into advanced clean energy systems that is part of the NICE Future Initiative. And I say that it's my honor to present it to you because, you know, this is actually an effort amongst a number of organizations, including some of those that were mentioned just now by Susie. So Energy for Humanity, my own organization, partnered with the Clear Path Foundation and Energy Options Network, so 3 NGOs. And we have a number of governments that have also signed up to this campaign, as well as other organizations, including NREL, the National Renewable Energies Lab, INL, and many others. So I'll tell you more about this. So we started from the perspective that the future energy systems characteristics that we would like to see. First of all, we have to make the transition within very urgent timescales. And this has really been a theme, I think, of this conference, so I'm not going to dwell on it today. But clearly we have around 30 years to really turn the tanker here and make this transition not only in the power sector, but across heat and transport as well, which means a very large transition in terms of liquid fuels, whilst also meeting rising global energy demand. So what do we want to see from our future energy systems? Well, the characteristics that we've picked here are that we would like our energy systems in future to be cost-effective, clean, reliable, and flexible. And today, generally speaking, in the future energy systems modeling, what we see is a large contribution from wind and solar, so variable renewable energy, natural gas and hydro, which offer dispatchable or flexible contributions, and then nuclear is sometimes represented in future energy systems modeling, although not always. But generally when it is, it tends to be large scale, mostly base load, generally gigawatt scale light water reactors, and not necessarily as cost effective as we would like to see. So our position was that actually we're seeing advanced reactor developers bringing these interesting technologies, so advanced reactors that may be light water SMRs, they may be advanced reactors that aren't depending on light water technology, coming to the market within the sort of 2030s timescales. But they're generally not represented in the modeling that we see around the world by governments, in mainstream modeling produced by other institutions in many of our countries. So we wanted to fill that gap, and that's really what this campaign is all about. Not just for the power sector, but actually looking beyond that into the sort of deep decarbonization challenge. So what contribution could advanced reactors potentially play in terms of contributing high temperature heat and even the production of hydrogen and synthetic fuels to help us with that larger decarbonization challenge? So here are the goals of the campaign. So first of all, we wanted to really help inform upstream design decisions by advanced reactor developers, by modeling what the potential revenue opportunities and the technical performance requirements could be. So in other words, what we weren't doing was already indicating what the cost and performance requirement, the cost and performance of these reactors were going to be. What we were going to do is back out what the market requirements would demand and help to inform upstream design decisions by those developers in order to develop products that will be useful into these market contexts. And then secondly, the goal was to really socialize the potential contribution that these advanced reactors could make in future energy systems. Because as I mentioned, these reactor technologies generally aren't represented in the modeling, and that isn't necessarily because of some institutional bias, although maybe it is, within these modeling communities. But it could actually be because nobody's come to talk to them before about these technologies and the contribution that they could make. So our goal was really to engage with governments and policymakers as well as reactor developers to ensure that the future energy systems modeling that was being undertaken was including these technologies and the contribution that they could make. And then finally, a communications outreach, which is more broad, which is looking at the larger public, climate and energy modelers and grid operators, looking at what their future energy systems may consist of. So, as I said, the campaign is one of the first times that advanced nuclear will be included in large-scale modeling. It's going to build on the model and methodology that we developed for a project that we're doing for DOE's ARPA-E, and I'll share some of the initial findings with you in a moment. We wanted to include many kinds of energy systems. So we're looking at future markets that have high penetrations of variable renewable energy sources in the mix. We're looking at heating and cooling with various storage options. We're looking at different applications such as desalination, industrial process heat, and crucially hydrogen and synfuels production. Now, many of you will have seen quite a lot of discussion around the hydrogen economy. The IEA has recently produced a report. The Committee on Climate Change in the UK produced a report on hydrogen and the contribution that it could make towards meeting our decarbonisation goals. But generally, what we see in the mainstream discourse in terms of clean hydrogen production are just two options. I was at a conference a few weeks ago in Calgary, and Michael Liebrick, the founder of Bloomberg New Energy Finance, was speaking about the importance of the hydrogen economy in supporting our decarbonisation goals. And he only presented two options for producing hydrogen. So one was electrolysis using variable renewables, and the other was steam methane reform with carbon capture and storage. And I asked him afterwards, I said, oh, you missed one. There's a third option, which is using nuclear technology, high temperature heat, high temperature steam electrolysis to produce hydrogen. It is absent from the discourse. So our goal is really to, not to compete with the other options, but at least it deserves to be considered alongside those other options. And the reason for that is because we think that there's a real potential to achieve very cost-competitive hydrogen production and synfuels production for use in shipping and aviation and other really hard to decarbonize sectors at scale. And that's actually the critical piece here, because whatever solutions that we're looking at and considering and driving down cost and finding competitive ways to develop this production, we have to think about it in terms of scale. So we talk about climate scale. And that should be a key feature of any of the options that we're looking at here, because we have to remember the urgency and the scale within which we're operating. So we've emitted half of the emissions that are in the atmosphere today within the last 30 years. And we have 30 years to turn the tanker. So we shouldn't be excluding any of these options. So that's part of the goal here with this campaign. So what are the requirements for the advanced reactors? So we're not being technology specific in terms of reactor technology. We're modeling very generic advanced reactor designs. These are the requirements that have actually been set by the ARPA-E program. For MITNA, which is the Advanced Reactor Program led by Rachel Slabaugh in the US. And her criteria are, they're generic, but they're stringent. So low capital cost, rapid permitting, no emergency planning zone, short construction time, low staffing requirement, low security cost design, thermal storage, and we'll come back to that in a moment, because our view at this point is that we shouldn't be building any nuclear reactors without thermal storage. And I'll explain why in just a moment. And then low-cost manufactured products with a learning curve. So these are the criteria that all of our advanced reactor developers should be aiming to meet in order to meet the market requirements in future. So I'm going to share with you now some initial findings from our modeling that we've been doing in the US. We've modeled 4 independent system operators in the United States as part of our ARPA-E project. And this is the kind of first contribution into this campaign. So I'm going to spend a moment on this slide and talk you through it. So you'll see the installed capacity, first of all, on the left. You can see today's capacity for New England in 2018. And the breakdown, broadly speaking, it's not hopefully you can read it, but you can see there's a large contribution from gas, which is the big grey box, and then you have, a small amount of renewables on the system right now in New England. And then for 2034, which is the baseline that we chose, broadly speaking, because it's about halfway between now and 2050, you can see that there's much larger contribution from renewables. So this is based on the NREL, so the National Renewable Energy Lab's REEDS modeling, which is available online. I encourage you to look at it. It's a really nice online interactive tool. And this is the scenario, which is high penetration of renewables and low gas cost. So it's ambitious, but also, fairly realistic. You can see there's a big contribution there from wind and solar, but still a lot of gas installed. And then on the next little bar chart there, we've added a little bit of advanced nuclear into the mix. And then on the other side, you can see the generating capacity. So you can see what actually is generating. And today, we have a lot of gas generating on the system. In the 2034 NREL model there in the middle, you can see that wind and solar are generating quite a bit, but we still have quite a lot of gas still generating, even into the 2030s. And this is consistent with most of the modeling that we're looking at. Even in very high penetration of renewables systems, the future energy systems modeling that we're finding has a lot of gas still generating on the system all the way up to 2050. But what happens when we add in a little bit of advanced nuclear, what it does is it crushes out the gas. And you can see that finally there. And this is consistent with the findings that we're delivering through all of the energy systems that we're looking at in the United States and beyond. And you can see here a 1 week in July. And you can see that in the system that doesn't include any advanced nuclear, you have gas essentially load following with the renewables. And because of the thermal energy storage, and this is the clever bit, so we have a 500 megawatt reactor with 500 megawatts of thermal energy storage. And we're using the thermal energy storage, basically hot bricks, that is recommended by MIT, by Charles Forsberg, who's one of the world's leading experts on thermal energy storage. And by having a turbine attached to the storage, it means that the reactor is either discharging to the thermal energy storage, to the battery essentially, or to the grid. And sometimes it's able to discharge from the storage and from the reactor at the same time because there's two turbines. So that allows you to have a very high capacity factor for that reactor, which makes it very economic, but it also creates flexibility. And that's one of the key features in the future energy systems that we'll need in order to partner effectively with variable renewables. So, what do we find? Well, we find that advanced nuclear reactors can help to stabilize grids with large shares of variable production. And they do have the potential to accelerate cost-effective emissions reductions through hybrid energy systems. And that's the goal. The goal isn't about any technology deployment, 100% this, 100% that. The goal is clean, reliable, and affordable energy systems. It's the outcome that we care about. It's about taking out the carbon from the system whilst also being competitive for consumers and keeping the lights on. Now, beyond that, we've looked at the power sector. Beyond that, we're also now looking at the potential for these advanced reactors to contribute towards other parts of our decarbonisation challenge, as I said, looking beyond electricity to heating, industry, and synfuels. And crucially, this is one of the first efforts to include advanced nuclear into energy systems modelling. And doing that within the context of the Clean Energy Ministerial it's a huge honour. And it's hugely important because what it does is it integrates advanced reactors into the climate and energy discourse in a meaningful way. We're not competing with renewables, we're actually supporting the large-scale deployment of renewables technology whilst maintaining the integrity of our energy systems for consumers, for grid operators, and for governments that care about supplying clean, affordable, and reliable electricity to their citizens. So thank you for your attention. I'm happy to discuss further, and we'll look forward to presenting more results when we come back to SEM 11 early next year. Thank you.